She does listen to the show, which is upsetting.
Who? Your mom?
Susanna.
Oh, Susanna.
Dude, I think my mom does listen.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Do we have mom listeners? And Nathan's mom that listens.
I mean, my aunts listen.
I know, they've called in.
They call it a lot.
That's hilarious that your mom knows that I can stick my dick in my own ass.
Oh, Jesus.
Yep. We're off to a running start here. So we have Oren Nimni, legal editor at Current Affairs.
Hello.
And we have Sparky Abraham, finance editor at Current Affairs.
Hello.
And you guys also do other stuff, which gives the lie to the whole, like, you can just write and you don't have to do anything else, which is, I resent. But not that anyway, whatever. So you guys are in town for what?
We're in town for the biannual Current Affairs editorial retreat.
Okay. Very, very official name.
Super official.
It's mostly us taking silly pictures on streetcars.
Took us on.
So it's not like a silent retreat.
Part of it is a silent retreat where we
Okay.
sit in a house for a week, making eye contact regularly and seeing how uncomfortable we get. But then from there, we actually do enjoyable activities.
Wait, how true is this?
the first part is not true at all.
But y'all did have a tea party.
Well,
We did have it. We had
I
multiple
saw.
tea parties.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I just feel like Nathan's such a weird dude that I'm like, maybe. I don't know.
Well, they did do something that sounds like it's made up, which is you were the bottom of a stack of editors. Were you?
I
not?
was, yeah.
How's your back?
My back's fine, actually.
So Current Affairs apparently put an editor on the shoulders of another editor on the shoulders of another editor, with Nathan on top for both whimsy reasons and I would imagine weight reasons, and challenged Jacobin to do it.
And the Baffler.
And the Baffler.
And in these times, ended up getting in on it, too.
Oh, okay, so have you had any response yet?
Yeah, in these, the Brunigs responded with a baby stack,
Yeah.
which was adorable.
Yeah.
And
Whatever,
then-
that's easy.
Yeah, I mean, look,
They had already taken the picture.
none of these are actual responses. Like, if we're
Right.
being honest, in these times didn't do a stack either. They all sat on like a banister of a staircase.
Well, they
and-
guilted us about violating OSHA rules.
Yeah, they were like, "Oh, yours isn't
Yeah.
OSHA approved,
But we're not
ours is."
employees,
But
so-
it doesn't matter.
There are way less OSHA rules than you would think. Like, I know that because I work in a kitchen that last year was extremely hot, and we ended up looking up the OSHA rules, and there's just not any.
So we're still waiting on Jacobin, but the way we issued the challenge was if they don't respond, we get possession of the magazine. So
Which I think is it's like an
I
hour
think they have
or
an
so.
hour
Yeah.
before we own all of Jacobin. So
Yeah.
Current Affairs is about to
Yeah,
grow.
tweets are
Seems
legally
fair.
binding. Is that
Oh, for sure.
just like on one party tweets can
Yeah.
just
Just
you guys are the legal experts.
Yeah, you
man.
heard it from the legal editor here.
Yeah.
Mary Devon lifted me on her shoulders during Mardi Gras, but that was just because we were on drugs.
Yeah,
Well,
that's true.
you know.
Was I on drugs? You were on drugs.
I definitely was.
I don't think I was.
Huh. I guess I assume everyone is
Yeah.
when people look as ridiculous as they do.
I mean, I was high and on pot and drinking alcohol, but I wasn't like on real drugs. Yeah.
So what have y'all been doing while you're in town?
What did we do? We talked about the future of socialism and the magazine and how we're going to create socialism.
We do a lot of that.
We ate a lot of things.
Yeah, we ate some things. I put on a squid costume for a little while.
You did do that.
It was really hot.
Have anything to do with the future of socialism?
Well, of course, yeah.
So we're all going to be underwater?
Well, I mean, we're at least going to act like it.
Okay. Just as long as we're not actually underwater, which,
It's the goal.
probably
We're
going to
trying
happen.
to prevent that.
It would be nice to avoid that. I'm not going to, say definitely no.
I was going to say about the, not being underwater thing, every once in a while, you, stress over climate disasters and how they're almost definitely going to happen. And then, the best answer that anyone has to dealing with it is okay, so we need socialism is the only way we can fight it. And it's true, and I believe that, but also explaining out loud to someone that if we just share enough, we're not going to be underwater. Sounds like you're saying a story to a child,
Right,
like a whimsical fucking.
Or Marianne Williamson.
Right.
Yeah. So, Oren, you routinely are sort of teased on the podcast, the Current Affairs podcast, for being the resident anarchist, anti-authoritarian kind of guy.
This is true. The teasing is unwarranted, but the anarchism is there.
Right. And so you want to talk a little bit about your radicalization, maybe?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, it's also funny because Nathan doesn't like to describe himself as an anarchist because he doesn't like to go to long consensus process meetings, but I mean, neither do I.
Right.
But I don't know. So I grew up in Seattle, sort of around anti-globalization stuff, and was kind of apolitical, but, got involved in some, adjacent to union organizing and some anti-neoliberalism stuff in high school, and then kind of just went on a trajectory from there and was in a much more militant anarchist posture when I ended up being forcibly roomed with Nathan Robinson my junior year of college. And
around when is this?
This is 2000. When did I graduate? This is like 2009.
I feel like that was still when, like, if you were at all to the left of, like the mainstream left, like everyone was more vocally an anarchist back then. Like socialism wasn't in fashion.
It wasn't in vogue. Like I feel like if you were a socialist, you were either into a really particular strain of like Marxism or socialism, or you were like. I remember DSA not being the cool thing, right? There was DSA and SDS on the campus, and DSA were the people that were like mostly liberals, but just didn't agree with some liberal things and didn't really do much. And then SDS also didn't do anything, of course, but was sort of like the anarchists.
Do you feel like
they were cooler about not doing shit?
What's
Yeah,
SDS stand for?
Students for a Democratic Society.
Yeah. Do you feel like the sort of Red Scare hangover is abating a little bit, where like the word socialism is less of like a bug? I was going to say bugaboo. I don't know what the fuck.
That's a thing.
Less of a taboo, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think anarchism is still ridiculous and out there for most people, and both in the sort of like it's terrifying sense, but also in the like, I don't understand where it fits historically with all the other movements thing. It seems like people are pretty all like I think that I expected more backlash around people calling themselves democratic socialists than there is. I think people are having a backlash in the way that I expect sort of corporate power and the capitalist class to have a backlash to things that intrude on any sort of power like that. But it doesn't seem like they're not really conjuring up as much like this is going to be Russia, right? There's always like, hey, look at Venezuela, isn't Venezuela shit? But that's not like their main salvo.
From your like ideological position, what's the mechanism for change moving forward for you? Is it community based or?
Yeah, it's community based. I do think like the sort of like environmental question actually makes it hard because I think there's probably, because of where we are now, we might actually need some sort of large scale state intervention. But in my heart of hearts, I would much rather live in a world without sort of states or laws, and I think that the mechanism for change is going to be probably local, very community-based, very much based on sort of mutual association and organizing and mutual aid. And I think that that's probably going to be the thing that fills in the gaps where government is failing and where people start to depend on more and more. And that's going to plant sort of the seeds for expanding that kind of work beyond what it has existed as now.
All right, this is the like boilerplate next question that I think you probably get almost every time you say this, but then like,
who's going to take out the trash?
No. Well, there's that, but I feel like that's like it's deliberately misleading and just trying to like throw a wrench in it when you can actually answer those questions, and also not that interesting. But I would think the next question would be like, so is electoralism a waste of time for the left then?
And this might just be me falling apart in my old age, but I don't think it's a waste of time as long as we don't put all of our eggs in one basket, right? There's an anarchist line that's like really, really anti-voting. People shouldn't vote. Voting is, what is the line? Like if your vote could change it or anything, then, that it would be illegal.
Right.
So there's that very strong anti-voting line. I like
it also is. Like there's so much fucking voter suppression. Like,
right. I mean, like your vote actually can't change that much. But I take the Chomsky position on voting is more aligned with mine, which is for most people, not for all people, especially people whose votes are being suppressed. But for most people, voting takes very little effort. And if there's any possibility that it might ameliorate something or cause some sort of harm reduction, I think it's worth doing. And I do think that I've had to examine my own views because the members of the squad are sort of exemplifying not necessarily how much policy change or actual action we can get done, because nothing really has changed yet.
But like Overton window moving.
Exactly. And there is something about like voting to, so like in my day job, I'm a lawyer, and like when we file lawsuits, we do a lot of media around it, and the lawsuit is trying to change something if you believe that law is a sort of vehicle for change. But even if you don't believe that, which I often don't believe, the sort of moving.
You're gonna get fired.
Come at me. Even if you don't believe that, sort of putting out a different narrative and moving the Overton window and saying like, look, I'm going to describe these problems for you in a way that's really, really visible. Lawsuits, media always reports on lawsuits. Media always reports on what Congress people are doing. And so if you have, so electoralism can change things, but I don't think in the way that people think. Like, I don't think power is built necessarily through electoralism, but it can be built adjacent to it, right? Like, you could have an electoral campaign that also shifts the power that was part of that campaign into actual community organizing.
I've never heard an argument against voting that wasn't... I've never heard a convincing argument against voting that wasn't, like, accelerationist. But, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's either accelerationist or just, like, this, or just sort of like obstinate, right? Like, this is a tool of the state. Never engage with anything that's a tool of the state.
What were you gonna say? Sorry.
Yeah, fuck libraries. So I guess sort of what you're saying then is like with electoralism, like from an anarchist perspective or like a Chomsky like libertarian socialist perspective, the main thing you can hope to achieve is to get someone in place that's like a charismatic enough leader to like shift public opinion. Kind of.
I mean, I think the main thing is engage with it to the amount that it's effective, but never think that liberation is going to come from it. And so I don't love sort of like the charismatic leader model, and I don't want I think on the podcast I'm the least Bernie Stan person because I'm very worried. Well, maybe Sparky is too, but I'm very worried about like the idea of just like falling in line behind someone and then having to be like, oh no, they're doing whatever they're doing is great. But to the extent that they're just getting a lot of public pressure on issues and shifting what is acceptable, I think that's worthwhile. I don't think we should put that much effort into it, but enough to do what we've done is fine.
Sparky, where do you fall on this?
Why do you think Bernie's a demagogue?
I think about this a lot less than Oren does. I mean, I think that like among the current affairs crew, I'm kind of like probably the least well developed in terms of theory and kind of
that's a lie.
No, I think it's probably true.
I'm always kind of skeptical of people that are too consistent and like too entrenched in
like orthodoxy.
A very specific school of Marxist thought. It's like I think you're probably just kind of like playing games with what you think is the correct opinion to have,
to
a certain extent.
People who are itching for like material change aren't gonna care if everything is
it's hard to get that bogged down in it. So I'm totally taken away from your question.
No, that's right. I mean, I feel like my whole kind of approach to my political life so far has been just to like kind of get as close as possible to a problem and then like work directly to try to do something about it. And it's just kind of whatever I fall into at the time, right?
So you worked at the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, right?
Yeah.
So that's like, sorry, go on.
Well, no, I mean, like, I think that, I guess I just keep finding myself like confronted with all these massive inequalities and it's not, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it's useful to think about whether voting changes anything, but usually I just go vote. Like it's low effort. I'll go vote for whoever seems good and then keep doing whatever else.
Which I think is probably the more simple way to get to the exact same thing. One of our people on current affairs, Pete Davis, frames this as like there are soil people and there are sky people.
one of the Pete taxonomies.
That like people start the way that people's politics develop.
It's either top down or bottom up.
Exactly. Yeah. Or even just that like you start very close to the problem, or you start sort of thinking about it in the abstract and then move towards solutions.
Right.
Which like both are fine ways to go. It's just a different thing.
Yeah, I think it's hard to defend the top down. I mean, I'm very top down. But it's hard to defend it in like any sort of actually rigorous conversation about it. Yeah.
I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I think the appeal of that is like if you don't have some sort of utopian vision that you're working towards, then everything can seem pretty hollow, and like individual fights can seem like less important if they're not a part of a larger piece that you have context for. I just think if there's like a very specific wording of how you think all of that should go and it's all going to fit in that perfectly, then you're way too bogged down in the details.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say the end of every peat taxonomy, which is what the soil and sky people are, is, and we need both.
Right. Yeah, that's sort of feedback. But I agree. Like if to the extent that you're, I mean, I think one piece of anarchism for me is just not being obsessed with any particular orthodoxy. Like I actually don't know whether I think from what I've seen, electoralism is probably not very liberatory, but has some benefits. But I'm willing to have my mind changed if I see a bunch of new stuff out of Ocasio-Cortez over the next couple of years, like maybe I'll think something different. Right now, I think this is probably how change happens and how I'd like to engage with it.
My favorite thing about anarchy is getting drunk and yelling at trains.
So, there is that.
Yeah.
Throwing things I like.
What about lesser evilism? Like in Louisiana, our politicians are all bad, and we always have to vote for pro-life people because we're like, at least it's not a Republican.
Right.
But then people will
all our
argue,
Democrats are pro-life.
Right, but then people argue, well, you would force, and I mean, I used to hate this, but people would argue, well, if you would stop voting for the pro-life Democrats, the Democrats won't be pro-life anymore. And I mean, with John Bel Edwards recently, because it used to be before we were like, so, I mean, and with the abortion stuff, things are getting way worse with a lot of things because of, Trump has, I think, made a lot of local elections much better, but I think in red states it's getting those things are all getting worse, even with like Democrats. The pro-life Democrats are becoming more pro-life because everyone's getting more vocal and feeling more emboldened. And I think that sorry to always talk about abortion, this is just the only thing I ever think about, but like, do you think lesser evilism is bad and that there's any merit to the idea that like you shouldn't vote in local elections for the end state elections, you shouldn't vote for a candidate if you fundamentally disagree with them?
So, I mean, I think two things. One, the sort of end of the Chomsky position on this is like that it's a little bit weird to think like voting isn't about what you actually believe, right? It's about choosing from a constrained set of options. And so we've given voting like way too much importance by thinking it has to match what's in your heart of hearts. And I think that there's some value in harm mitigation, and harm reduction. At the same time, the way that I usually like to think about reform is the way that Angela Davis puts it about prison abolition, which she says, when you're thinking about, you have this utopia that you see of prison abolition, and the question is, what are the small steps that you're going to get there? And there are two types of, reforms that you see in front of you. There are reformist reforms and there are non-reformist reforms. Reformist reforms are the ones that actually prop up the underlying system that you're trying to abolish, and it sets up something you're going to have to abolish later. So like a separate prison for only gay folks. Building that, and you're like, well, this will reduce the harm the violence that some people suffer in jail, but it's a whole other jail. And so she would say that's a reformist reform. Don't build that. That's a lesser evilism. Don't engage in that. But there are non-reformist reforms that don't get you all the way there, but also don't establish something that you're going to have to work against. And I think that method is helpful for me in figuring out what decisions to make as you walk on the road to the thing that you're trying to see. I don't think that solves all of the like micro pragmatic questions about like what is actually the thing that's
candidate
helpful.
To candidate, of course, yeah.
But I think that general framework sometimes helps me in like political decisions or in other stuff.
So would you call like Obamacare a reformist reform? Like basically it presents itself as like harm reduction, but ultimately it's just propping up the like basic mechanism of
sort of
what it should be defeating.
Private insurance.
Right.
Yeah.
I actually would, mostly because it wasn't founded in any sort of sense that it matters what quality your healthcare is. This kind of sense was like, well, if everyone has some kind of access to some kind of healthcare, then we're going to be okay. And that's not really the socialist vision of what healthcare looks like. It's everyone should not have access, but should have healthcare, and it should all be high quality.
Right.
And so I think, there is a pragmatic question about like the extent to which Obamacare opened the door for a further shift, or if it did the alternative thing of saying, like, allowing everyone to say, well, look, we've gone far enough. We don't actually need something like Medicare for all. Like, in the arguments that Joe Biden is making about how, Medicare for all would actually destroy Obamacare and how can you be so terrible? Right. I mean, that, that's a whole bullshit thing too.
I think there's a distinction to be made between like enacting or like enacting a reformist reform versus just voting as a citizen in the direction of that reform. Do you know what I mean? Like I think like trying to get Hillary Clinton elected is like I voted for her. I voted for her, and like that it was setting up a whole lot of shit that I would have to fight against later. But like like you said, it's multiple choice. Like, what the fuck are you gonna do?
Yeah, you don't have to vote your heart. And like I think that if someone lived in an area where your vote counted and your vote mattered, then you probably should have voted for Hillary Clinton. Right. And it would have been no skin off your nose. And then as soon as she got into office, you should have opposed her with every, speck of your being. But you probably, you could have done, the least to do that. If you lived in a place where your vote didn't matter, then, vote third party and get, people on the ballot for next time.
Yeah.
Sorry.
What about you, Sparky?
I bet we'd be in Iran right now if Hillary was president.
I kind of think that, I think that's possible.
True.
That's possible.
What do you think, Sparky?
Yeah, I mean, that seems about right. Like I voted for like Rocky Anderson or somebody in 2012.
I don't even know who that is.
It's so California. Isn't he in California?
No, I think he's a Utah guy.
Is he a Utah guy?
Yeah,
Oh.
but he's like the Justice Party.
Oh, I feel like I only see him on ballots in certain places.
He was basically like Obama is like mass incarceration and drone killing president.
Yeah.
I lived in Connecticut. My vote didn't matter. So
I mean, I can't vote. So I also this choice is taken away from me.
Okay.
So I'm not a citizen.
Oh, okay. Benjamin loves to talk about Israel. I saw your panel that you were on, or you were on a panel about how Israel and America are both the fascist states in 2016.
Yeah.
It was good.
I got a lot of hate mail.
Yeah, I bet you did.
Yeah, no shit.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's a really serious argument that Israel is committing mass war crimes and atrocities. Gaza's an open air prison. People are dying left and right. I find it confusing actually that there's any serious debate about the issue.
Yeah.
It seems extremely clear cut. I think there is an open question about like what the best, when you're in a pile of shit, I think there's a question about what the best way out is. And that I actually don't know that there are very good answers to, but it's weird to me that we don't all share the same, moral starting place.
Yeah.
I mean, people in America are so completely convinced that like Hamas is like this horrible death cult and like they're doing most of the killing. Like I think people just are completely wrong about what's happening.
Yeah, I mean they're deprived of information.
Yeah, they're deprived of information.
I went on like a sort of self-betterment thing where I was like going to the gym and like on the stationary bike reading like Associated Press dispatches like from top to bottom every day, and like I wish I could think of an example, but the fucking Orwellian fucking twists that they were putting on on their Middle East coverage was really upsetting.
We did some fake, or I don't know, it was a fake headline, a fake New York Times headline that was based on a real one in Current Affairs that was like, Israeli missile visits cafe. It's all shit like that, and so. I mean,
that really is like the only fucking skill like that editorial staff has as like writers is like the creative ways they like figure out how to soften what the fuck is happening with like Israeli war crimes.
I mean, the world is very simple. You see, you're like, oh, a bunch of people are dying, and then everyone has this argument over like whether it's actually apartheid or not, and like I don't find that to be a meaningful discussion. Like the thing is bad enough that you probably want to stop it. The problem with Gaza and the West Bank right now is like obviously Palestine should be free. The political structures that are in Gaza and the West Bank are not great either, and part of that is a creation of like what happens when you have a colonial power influencing your politics. Like the PLO sucks, and they are sort of like collaborators with the Israeli government. Hamas sucks. I mean, like that doesn't justify any of Israel's actions, but it is like you're in a situation where the the rot has seeped so deep into every facet of the situation.
And it's pretty hard to fucking organize like an ideal opposition when like your whole society doesn't have water.
Exactly. Like how do you think like how do you think about this thing and without like ideally, Palestinians would have a ton of resources and then be able to sort of produce a society from that reflected what people actually wanted.
I'm constantly like baffled by how many people like give excuses to Zionists who wouldn't do the same to like racists. And like I think it sort of drives me crazy because I don't know how to get through to people in a way that like shows that there's like not even an equivalence, like it's the same fucking thing, like the exact same deliberate cruelty happening like to Palestinians is like it's the same model of what's happening at the border right now.
Right.
It's like the point of all of it is to like demoralize the population.
Exactly. And if you look at the way that Israel treats even non-Arab members of the society, Ethiopians or anyone, like there's white supremacy very much baked into the whole system over there. And I think it's there's this line that sort of like liberals and even people that are a little bit to the left like to parrot about how Israel has to have the right to exist as it is as a Jewish state. And I want everyone to have a very good life. I want people in Israel to have a very good life. I also don't understand that line because I think people should believe very deeply in democracy. And I think if you believe in actual democratic control, like then Israel will be a Jewish state while sort of the people vote for that. And then it won't be when the people don't vote for that. And so like Israel's actually much more honest about their terror of demographic override. And the U.S. is like, don't worry. That's, it's always going to exist as this thing. If you believed in democracy, then it wouldn't.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. Israel doesn't pretend it's not an ethno state.
No,
it's
they're very clear. Yeah. Much more clear than the U.S. is about Israel, and much more clear than the U.S. is about itself.
Yeah, it is odd that people who would obviously have a problem, they wouldn't say it was anti-Christian to be like, I mean, if they want to be a Christian state, then you got to let them. Like I don't know. I think when things are far away from you and when you're fed, I think when things are far away from you, it's easy to ignore. And also people are really afraid of sounding anti-Semitic.
Well, yeah, I mean, one running theme on this podcast is like we complain about the very cynical appropriation of social justice to perpetuate neoliberalism, and like the pro-Israel crowd invented cynical use of very important shit. Do you know what I mean? Like it was. I mean, obviously they didn't invent it, but it's just like that. That is the model that is now being used for like intersectionality that intersects with everything but class. Coincidentally,
Yeah, I mean, I find it very insulting the way that Israel and liberal Zionists in the United States use anti-Semitism. Like, anti-Semitism is very much existent, has been a very powerful force for a long time in history, is very important, and is like fighting anti-Semitism is a deep left value. Right. And instead, what Israel has done is, try to conflate Judaism and like a militarized ethno state, and that it honestly is the most anti-Semitic thing to do, is to make people into assumed killers and perpetrators of racist apartheid. Like I find it very and then the left has to do all these backflips, right, where it's like you have to avoid anti-Semitism, but also then people sometimes do slip into anti-Semitism in like a reaction against that. Like the left has always been very clear, that fighting anti-Semitism is just as core as fighting class warfare and fighting against white supremacy, fighting against capitalism, all these sorts of things. But it's been a real mindfuck.
I mean, that sort of equating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism thing bolsters anti-Semitism too, because then there's such a case where it's like, so why does this very small group have such a extreme influence over the world? And that's literally the conspiracy of fucking anti-Semitism.
It's not a small group of people in reality. It's wealthy people that have interest in sort of arms sales and global dominance across the world, in Western Europe and in the United States mostly, although now in Brazil. But you're right. It feeds perfectly into this narrative because it does seem like
what you just said is like everyone's fear.
Right. It's like, oh my God, like everyone's taking over and we would never realize. But like actually the people that are taking over are a very different small cabal that is always sort of, which is the, managerial corporate class that is, gives money to all of these things.
Right. So, pivot, what's your utopia look like?
Sparky?
Yeah.
It's a Jewish ethnos.
There are watershed borders.
Oh yeah.
we love that.
So
I read the whole thing and I'm so stupid.
Yeah. Okay. Keep going. Yeah. So let's talk. That article just came out like a couple days ago.
It was in the last print edition that we just released online.
Yeah. So it just came out online.
The map was really cool.
Isn't that map cool?
It was really cool.
Yeah.
So there was a map of the West for our listeners that was based on the way water actually flows, not based on people owning water, like the way to explain it.
Yeah, so
it was from 1869, right?
Right, and I think this was John Wesley Powell's map that he actually drew for his proposal.
Who looks like Henry Zabrowski, but no one knows who that is. Anyway,
I don't know who's Henry Zabrowski.
He's a comedian who has a podcast. Anyway.
Does he have one arm?
No.
John Wesley Powell only had one arm.
That's an easy way to tell them apart.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah,
it's
that's
good
true.
map drawing.
He's got at least one arm.
Right, he has to have at least one arm. So, I mean, his idea was basically that the access to freshwater resources in the West was what was going to control politics and development and everything. Because there's just not very much water. There's just not very much water west of the 100th meridian, which now I think is the 98th meridian. The rainfall is not enough to basically sustain farming.
Right. He said is like 2% max irrigation potential. Like
yes.
2% of the
2% of the land is arable, basically. There's enough water to irrigate. He didn't have a sophisticated understanding of groundwater, and so I think that actually the number using groundwater is higher than that. But groundwater comes with its own renewability problems.
Right.
But basically his idea was that if you are building political communities in an area where life is going to have to revolve around management of a scarce resource, then you should draw your community boundaries. You should organize yourselves around regulating that resource in a way that makes sense. And so watersheds, I think for anybody who doesn't remember what a watershed is, right? Like a watershed is the area where all of the water flows to the same place. So like a puddle has a watershed, right? Like a creek has a watershed. It's just anywhere where if water lands on the ground, it ends up in the creek, that's the creek's watershed. And then kind of as you build, the creek's watershed is probably inside of a river's watershed. And that river's watershed might also be inside of another river's watershed. So it's a bunch of overlapping systems. But, his idea was basically the water systems are based around watersheds, where if you do something, even if you are not, if your land isn't bordering the Colorado River, but if you're in the Colorado River's watershed, whatever you do is going to affect what happens to the Colorado River. And so, where fresh water is this extremely important, extremely scarce resource, you just thought, well, wouldn't it be easier if we organized ourselves around the area of land that affects different sections of that resource,
as opposed to using fundamentals, as opposed to using arbitrary straight lines or rivers, which is the opposite.
Right. I mean, rivers really make. I mean, I used to have this weird pedantic annoyance with straight line borders, where I'd go, "Why would you draw straight line borders? You have rivers. Rivers make perfect sense as borders. Rivers actually make no sense as internal borders, right? Right. They make sense as external borders because they're the boundaries of where you can exert your military power. It's hard to cross rivers,
right?
But internal borders, it makes no sense at all. And in fact, what you end up with is the Colorado River needs to supply California, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, and Nevada with water. And they all have to enter in these giant contracts, and they have to renegotiate the contracts constantly, and they have to account for changes in the river, and they have to account for whether there are political entities that don't access the Colorado River's water, but that are inside of the watershed, and so their farming practices might result in pollution, might result in an increased salinity, right? If you organized around everybody who both had an effect and needed to access the resource, that would make things a lot simpler.
Right.
As it is, we just have all of these massively entangled, confusing incentives that make it very hard to, provide ourselves with water, to do agriculture, to drink.
Explain wait, what was it about Mulholland Drive? I already forgot what it was, how they took water from somewhere that was naturally going and now it's gone there, and then they took it and made a fancy place.
So the Owens River Valley. So if you drive...
This is what the movie Mulholland Drive is about.
Exactly. This is the plot of the movie. I'm just going to recount it. No, I mean, this is actually what the movie Chinatown is about.
Mm-hmm.
So the Owens River Valley is a valley in California. It's like if you drive from, LA to like Mammoth Lakes or like LA to Reno, you drive up the 395 and you go through the Owens River Valley, which used to be called the Switzerland of California. The Owens River was this kind of big lush river that ran out of the mountains through the valley. Mount Whitney's there, kind of Death Valley's off to the right. So in order to basically bring water to expand LA, I mean, Mulholland, as far as I understand it, and like all of this, if you want details on it, just go read Cadillac. The Cadillac Desert is the book.
Okay.
But in order to do agriculture in the San Fernando Valley in LA, which Mulholland and a bunch of his buddies own land in, so in order to make that land more valuable, basically, they needed to access water. And the way that water rights are done in the West, which was also John Wesley Powell's idea, but in the East, you basically have rights to the water that you own land adjacent to. In the West, you can buy rights to other people's water. Or to water that you don't have land on, right? So basically, Mulholland ran, when he was at the LA Department of Water and Power, ran this big racket to go up into the Owens River Valley and acquire all of the water rights to the Owens River and divert it via aqueduct to the LA to irrigate the San Fernando Valley, which then increased land prices, and he got very rich. Mulholland Drive is a fancy street in LA that's named after him. There's a lot of stuff in LA that's named after him. He actually there was a dam that burst in the San Fernando Valley when he was in charge of it that killed a bunch of people. So his reputation took a little bit of a hit afterwards.
What's the timeline on this?
But very fancy thing.
So this is 20s and 30s. And there was this big.
That's like right around when everyone was moving to California, right?
Yes. Yeah. So there's a big explosion in California. Like all the citrus farms, everybody wanted to farm citrus. Like citrus is very valuable. And you need water for it, and they already had a lot of sunshine. So basically, the California aqueduct system was built during this time. But there was actually there were kind of water wars. I mean, there have been a few instances of being something approaching a water war, but there was a lot of organizing within the Owens River Valley community in order to fight this, including some people who were dynamiting the aqueduct to try to stop it. But ultimately, if you go, Owens River Valley used to go into Owens Lake. Owens Lake doesn't exist anymore. Owens River is basically just the aqueduct now. And in fact, in the 1970s, there were kind of a renewed bunch of fights around the groundwater in the Owens River Valley. And now LA is taking most of the groundwater too.
I'm always astounded by how at the same time in human history, someone could be figuring out the theory of relativity, and then a bunch of other people can be like, we're gonna fuck up all of the water because we want oranges.
Right.
I mean, this is the really fucked up part of this, right? Is you kind of have, or at least I kind of have this background sense when I'm thinking about these things in the past, especially with natural resources, where you go, probably people just didn't really know, right? Like they probably thought it was more renewable of a resource than it was.
Yeah.
And they didn't. Like they had it's documented that their plan was to draw down these resources over 25 to 30 years.
Also, drought is something that has been happening throughout fucking human history. It's not like that was a new concept to any generation.
That was a big thread, or not thread, but that was a big theme of what you were writing, is that people don't talk about drought because it's not as sexy, even though it kills the most people.
Yeah, it kills a ton of people.
Yeah.
Not sexy.
That is,
killing people generally.
It's a lot sexier when people drown.
What's real sexy is
drink water.
Earthquakes don't turn the whole world into a vibrator.
It is. Yeah.
So,
people sit on washing machines.
Okay, great. So the argument that you were making, and it is a Powell argument, is that state borders should be drawn with watersheds in mind. Not necessarily an entire watershed per state, but...
Yeah, and it doesn't have to just be states. I mean, you could do it for counties, you can do it for whatever. I mean, you could just look around the country and look at all of the complicated agreements that political subdivisions have to enter into to regulate their water, and get rid of all that sort of bureaucracy and confusion instantly.
Especially when you're dealing with a fucking
beef lobbyist who's like, so we're going to poison all of it,
right,
and go fuck yourself,
right. And I mean, obviously, like, the borders don't solve the problem, right? Because you can still have some watersheds that just get completely fucked over.
Well, I mean, this is my question: is that, like, what do you say to the argument that, like, sharing a water source creates kind of like a mitigating quality, or like a mechanism for accountability, where it's like it prevents the like fuck you got mine approach to water, which is like, if my watershed's healthy, then like who gives a shit about?
Yeah, I just don't think that's practically true. I think what actually happens is this stuff, we're not actually organized around it. People don't think about it very much. It ends up living in these very complicated interjurisdictional bureaucracies,
right,
that are much, much easier for capital to manipulate because no one's really paying attention.
Right, yeah, it's kind of like the more like ink that's spilled regulating something, the more loopholes there will be.
Yeah, I mean, not only ink that's spilled, but it's just like how obscure it's. If you start talking about this stuff to people, like, eyes just glaze over immediately.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't. It's very central to life.
Yeah, and I do, but it is just like with everything, when wealthy people are the ones who are controlling something. I mean, I think if you framed it, not you, I think your article did a great job of this, but there has to be a way to emphasize that it is a race. I mean, it's an issue of like racism.
Oh, yeah.
And because even though it is, it's, I guess, intrinsically just about wealth, that is always going to be, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a particular thing for the West, right? But in the East, you also have water problems that are all driven by capital and are extremely racist.
Right.
You've got like in Baltimore and Cleveland, like people get foreclosed on over their water debt. Like you've got Flint, which is next to the most freshwater resources almost of anywhere in the country, and yet can't manage to like deliver clean water.
Pipelines going through sovereign states.
Sovereign states, right? Like, I mean, yeah, the capital's manipulating water resources everywhere. It's just how that manipulation manifests is a little bit different place to place. The thing that's kind of unique about the West, at least in terms of America, is the water's very scarce. It's also it's funny development, right? Where like American government kind of starts in the East and then moves west and just has trouble thinking about how the West is different as it goes.
Yeah.
Kind of similarly to how like God, I'm going to remember this wrong, but there's some bit of water law that we imported from England that basically assumed that all rivers were tidal rivers because all rivers in England are tidal rivers. And so,
What's
like,
that? What do you mean?
This is this like where the tide, like, they're close enough to the ocean that like when the tide is flowing in or out, it'll change the direction of the river.
Oh, wait. Okay. The Mississippi River. Julie was insisting that it changed direction. Like, we were looking at it and she was like, it's going in the direction that it's not supposed to go. Does it change direction?
I don't know if Mississippi
Was this right
river.
before the fucking hurricane?
Yeah.
'Cause definitely.
Okay, so it does change directions?
I think so.
Because Jeff was
that's what a storm
insistent-
surge is it not?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I thought a storm surge was just getting higher. I didn't realize that it had to do with the direction of the river.
Yeah, maybe it doesn't change direction, but there's pressure going this way so that the stuff coming this way just goes up.
Okay.
That would be my guess. I
Yeah.
don't know anything, and I'm
Right.
just talking out my ass, which is my trademark.
Oh, by the way, this is also what I'm like not a water expert.
Oh,
I
shut
just
up. You
like
know
wrote
more
a couple.
than we
I read
do.
a couple books.
That's why we're on a podcast.
But there's all these things that we just assume as background, and then you like encounter them and you have to deal with them, and we usually do it poorly.
Yeah.
So, okay, we are doing a horrible job with all of this as a society
Yeah,
now.
with all natural resources.
Yeah, with
Yeah.
all natural resources, but like water,
The one that you
number
die
one,
if you don't have it in
central
3
one,
days.
most important.
That one.
Yeah.
Right.
Fucking thing.
Water's the most important.
As things definitely get worse before they get better, if they get better at all, like
Awesome.
come on.
No, you're
We're talking about a utopia. This all started with the utopia. We're not talking about practical. We're talking about what we're talking
Existential
about.
dread.
Yeah. We're talking about the good possibility.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're gonna go with that utopian, then you have to like enter in the realm of like, I don't know, maybe nanobots are gonna fix it. It's like, that's not-
But I mean, yeah, it would. I mean, it is. We're not thinking about the practical way of getting there. Nanobots is, I think, a lot less practical than organizing around what's. I mean, I don't know. Is it too fucked now that you could organize around watersheds?
I don't know. I mean,
Well,
I mean, people would probably murder you.
If the answer to that is yes, then like, so what? Okay,
Yeah.
well done. Like, no, the answer can't be yes. And maybe the answer is actually yes, but you have to try to organize around it anyway because you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is like we have to do that. We have to at least. I mean, ideally, we've figured out the answer. That's the answer. But whatever it is, we're going to have to reorganize our society around water in the coming decades, over the next century, like generously. If that happens, are there going to be, like, if there were to be like water wars?
Yeah.
Do you think it would be anything close to like localized water wars, or would it necessarily be like if a certain class of people, like would the rich just try and like have like a global coalition of fucking water?
I'm just imagining people throwing
like,
bottles of Nestle bottled water at people. Right.
All I know is
this is like a crazy spectrum.
Water fight!
my brain is so dumb.
No, well, on the one hand, this is like a crazy, unanswerable, speculative question, right? But on the other hand, like I don't know that much about it, but I think there was a huge political battles and maybe some violence in Bolivia around their water system and the government.
The riots in Cochabamba and the whole, and like where indigenous folks were trying to build their own pipelines from like wells that they owned, and then the water company came and took them over.
Jesus.
Right.
Jesus
and
Christ.
like people
Was that
died.
Nestle or?
I think it was Nestle, but I also think it was either a subdivision of Nestle or there was another company there too.
That's even bigger. Or no.
No, that just like
I don't know if
operates.
anybody's
That just
bigger
like
than Nestle.
some other instant breakfast company.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, but I feel like this always happens with like all the
Everything
natural
I love
resource
is
fights.
bad.
Like we were driving around the city and past like Tulane, and we're talking about how during Katrina, like they just shut off access to like that part of the city so that like poor people couldn't get in.
Right.
And it would like guarded it with armed guards, and that's what they did in Bolivia, where like they just went and broke all of the locks that locals had put on their pipelines, put new locks on, and basically seized those because the government had made some kind of deal with the water companies where basically they had access. I mean, that's what they do in Flint. Like, that's what they do. That's what states do in the United States. We just don't actually resist that hard.
I mean, if we're being real, that's what like water companies do in the United States. They come and put a lock on your water pipe to make sure you can't get water anymore if you haven't paid your bill to their satisfaction. I mean, it's interesting because there are like relatively recent historical precedents for like something that looks like a water war in the United States. I mean, Arizona mustered a navy in the 1930s to occupy the site of dam building in order to stop California from like accessing more of the Colorado River than Arizona thought it was due. Like there's literally a Navy of Arizona and an admiral. Nobody got shot, but like this is like a military action. It wasn't.
Yeah. Imagine the inferiority complex you would have as the admiral of Arizona's
Oh, are you kidding?
Navy.
That guy was probably stoked. He was probably so happy.
No, it's like being a Kentucky colonel.
I don't think so.
Anyway, sorry, go on.
I think that dude had like on his business card forever, like admiral, whatever.
Yeah, so like so what are the cautionary tales to take away from the way water management or water mismanagement manifested itself in the West?
I mean, I think
You just got to make a cool noir movie starring Jack Nicholson.
If you can get Jack Nicholson on it, then nothing will change.
That was the point of that movie too.
Right.
Yeah. It's like we're fucked.
We're totally fucked.
Yeah. What a dystopian masterpiece by a horrible piece of shit.
Rango also, the movie Rango, right, with the lizard, Johnny Depp, animated, was also Chinatown.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Never seen it.
No, I mean, I think
Never gonna.
the lesson is the same thing we've learned or we're learning or we're trying to learn with housing and education and food and with everything else, right?
Oh, that doesn't bode well for water.
No, I mean, it's already right. I mean, like the path I think is obviously decommodification.
It's a subsidized
Right.
private water company where people have a choice of whether or not they want clean water.
Yes,
Right.
water choice.
Water choice.
Like if you want people not to die from being poor, you have to decommodify the things that they need to live.
Right.
And like that's the lesson for all of it.
We're gonna test how hydrated these kids are, and if they're dehydrated, then we're gonna take the water away from them to motivate them.
That's right.
To get more water.
That's called a nudge, I think.
Yeah.
So, y'all both work, y'all's professions and your non-profession and your I don't know what current affairs is to you, but it's not your profession. It's something that you do that's like somewhere between a profession and a hobby.
They
right?
have
'Cause you
ankle
don't-
bracelets on right now, and they get shocked anytime they don't write something, and Nathan just has a little button.
Yeah.
But y'all are good
No,
lawyers,
Nathan,
right? You do good law.
we would never say that. Nathan.
Are y'all both practicing lawyers?
Yes.
And you're in
Go ahead.
yeah. Which laws? You go first.
So I'm in Boston. I'm at a civil rights nonprofit. I run the immigration docket. So I don't do like asylum applications or individual immigration cases. I sue the government, state government sometimes, but mostly the federal government, to stop the rescission of immigration programs, to get people out of immigration detention.
You just had a big win in June, right?
I did have a big win in
June.
So
my understanding is ICE was like stalking people and then like when they went to court, arresting them in the court.
Exactly. Yeah, they were looking at criminal and civil dockets, basically to track which people they thought would be arrestable by immigration enforcement.
Jesus.
And then on the steps of the courthouse, or sometimes in the courthouses, or on the way out, they would basically snatch them, and then no one would ever be seen. So they were using the courts as a trap. And so then, that has all these sort of other externalities where like people, to the extent that court, we want people to go to courts, like people didn't go to sue their bosses, people didn't go for like a restraining order, people didn't go for any of these things. And ICE was like, well, we have to do this because this is, how we know where people are. And then, some judge in Massachusetts was arrested for trying to sneak an immigrant out the back.
Jesus Christ.
The U.S. Attorney's Office charged her with obstruction of justice.
Oh my
and so
God.
it's kind of like this little weird federal state war.
There's extremely clear moral case against this. And like, as someone who also probably falls closer to like fucking anarchist than, like a fucking tanky or whatever the fuck people give a shit about now. How do you what was the legal case against that?
Oh, one thing. Sorry, I just wanted to jump in. One thing that I thought was fascinating is that you filed that with a couple of DAs.
I did.
Because they wanted it for different reasons.
They did. And, I will say it was not like the easiest decision in the world,
right?
Because district attorneys...
Oh, that's not a gotcha.
No. I just be honest, I think sometimes, you sort of, law is very imperfect and not a liberatory tool, and sometimes you make imperfect, decisions. Yeah. I do think that, like, anything that puts a roadblock in the step of immigration enforcement is a good.
Right.
But yeah, we filed it, my clients are two district attorneys, one that's sort of more recent, kind of a part of the wave of progressive district attorneys.
Right.
And one that's been there for a while longer, and then the public defender agency, and then a community group in Chelsea, Massachusetts. And so the legal theory I think is cool, which is back in England before the United States.
Damn, you're going way back.
Yeah. Look, you got to be creative on some of this shit.
Yeah.
They developed this this common law privilege against civil arrest. So sometimes people were civilly arrested, not criminally arrested, but civilly arrested for having outstanding debts or whatever. But when people had to come to the king's court, when the king had summoned them in, there was this privilege that if you were like, look, I'm coming into the king's court, then you couldn't be civilly arrested. If you killed someone, you could be arrested, but you couldn't be civilly arrested. English common law gets imported into the United States, and so do all of these sorts of privileges. So stuff like habeas corpus and all these sort of like common law things come over into the United States.
Why roll your own when you could just?
Because you're like, oh, that seems fine. Everyone was
Let me
doing
bum
that.
one of them tailor-mades.
That privilege, comes along too. Civil arrest mostly disappears. I mean, people do actually still get arrested for fines and fees all the time, but now they're actually criminal violations for the default. So there's very, very few civil arrests, except most of immigration is a civil arrest system where warrants aren't real. They're just created by the immigration system. They're not signed off by a judge or anything. The immigration system is just like, we want to arrest this person. They write up a little piece of paper and then they go and snatch someone.
So they're basically just writing like, fuck you on a paper,
essentially.
And they're like, it's the law.
Essentially. And like, there's been some good resistance where people are like, you don't have to let someone into your house if they only have an ICE administrative warrant. You do under the law if a judge has signed the warrant. But so some people are doing a good job of resisting raids by sort of sussing out that difference. But basically, our argument was in 1952 when the main immigration statute, the INA, was passed. When Congress passes statutes, they do it against the background principles of common law. So, when the Fair Housing Act was passed, it did it against background principles of tort law, so you can still sue for a tort in housing. And so when they passed the immigration statute, our argument is that it incorporated in this common law privilege against civil arrest from the kings. And so that means that ICE has the authority under the statute to civilly arrest people, but there's limits. And the limits are, if you have legitimate court business, then you can't be arrested. And at least the victory that we have now is no one in Massachusetts can be arrested, not only in courts, but going to or coming from courts. And because Massachusetts has had some other good rulings about whether or not saying that local officials can't assist in civil enforcement, it basically means that ICE has to arrest people at their houses, which is much more difficult and usually requires them to get a judicial warrant so they can actually get into the houses. So it's stopped a lot of ICE arrests in Massachusetts, which is great. But yeah, the legal theory is like, this law incorporated Old English common law, so you can't do that and get the fuck out of here.
How do I mean, like, how do you feel about that just personally? Because, like, I mean, I don't mean to, like, put you on blast with your job or whatever, but, like, it sounds like know that this is all, like, absurd to even have to, like, start talking about.
All of law is absurd. Like, all of law is pushing... all of people that try to do good things in the law is just trying to cram the morals that you actually believe are true into arguments that power has said that they will accept. And oftentimes they don't accept them anyway, right? Like, we know that judges don't actually accept, things that are cogent legal arguments. And that's why the law can't really be liberatory, because they're always going to do the things that are in the interest of power. There's a good book by Duncan Kennedy where he talks
necessarily
about, like,
regressive, because it's based on what's already happened.
What's already happened. It's very conservative. The liberal obsession with, like, precedent is very confusing to me, because precedent is usually bad, like, is an inherently conservative thing.
If there's a through line to, like, all of our, like, political thought on
Constitution
this
is stupid.
Fuck the Constitution. If you care about it, you're a nerd. Go fuck yourself.
And I think, for people that have to do, like, constitutional
law. But also,
you
do have, but also people who are using it to do
if it's professionally necessary, cool.
But it's like any tool, right? It's like any tool. Like, it's good for when it works and it's bad when it doesn't. I mean, as a general rule, it has some underlying values, most of which are bad because of the time and people who formed it. But it also is often kind of value neutral, and that means that whoever the ruling class is interprets those values a particular way.
Right.
So we often lose. That said, this is the tool that I'm like. If law was abolished tomorrow, great, and I'm fine with that. But this is the tool that I'm using now to try to get people free a little bit. Yeah. So we kind of have to use that tool. But I do think that the important thing is to make sure that, like, you always pair law with organizing, so that people aren't like, oh, we won this victory.
Right.
Like, so usually for my cases, like, I bring people we pack the courtroom. We have, like, we do it in tandem with a community organization, so that it's like, good. Okay, like, great, this case stopped ICE from going to courts. One of my other cases stopped, like, a couple 100,000 people from being deported. That's great. And we're not actually going to build a world that we want to see where people don't have precarious immigration statuses unless we organize and build power, because the courts are never going to give that to us. Right.
I was thinking and listening, but also thinking the entire time we were talking about how I see people say all the time, this is horrific, like, what's happening right now. And I guess we've always had horrific atrocities happening in America. It's just that, like, I'm alive now, and
things are really particularly
they're very bad. But I know that a lot of people would say they've always been bad, and I totally agree. And, like, people are like, you're gonna look back and people are gonna say, what did you do? And you're gonna have to say nothing. But I
am gonna have to say that.
Yeah, but I don't want to have to say that. But I also have no idea. I guess people would say, like, join DSA, but, like, there are detention facilities. What do you do if you don't have a professional background in this to help people, besides, like you were saying, in tandem with the legal system, like have community organizers there? Is that pretty much it? Like, is that?
No, actually, I think so. Brianna Rennick's one of our other editors who does immigration work on the border, and me wrote an article about sort of things that people can do beyond calling their Congress people, and I recommend people look it up. But I do think that sort of the easiest answer is there are people doing organizing around this in every city.
Just pay attention.
And literally just go ask them what they think is needed. People shepherding families, like going and visiting loved ones in detention facilities or even in criminal, detention, blocking detention facilities,
I was just killed, but he did set a cop's car on fire. But that's what they said.
He did. Yeah. So, I mean, do what risk feels good to you.
Right.
But
that was the kindest way. Whatever, that was a lot.
do what you're going to do. But,
whatever your style is, man.
He was like an old anarchist, though. I think he knew he was.
And I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna knock him. But But like, the stuff that, and I'm not saying go do this either. But none of this is legal advice. But like, there's someone that was part of a group that provides assistance to people that are crossing borders, a group that provides water out in the desert, that is currently being prosecuted in a really bullshit case. He's now being re-prosecuted after there was a hung jury. Giving water to people, giving shelter to people, going to these sorts of trainings, anything that you can do, I think is particularly helpful. And then Brianna's organization takes donations and volunteers.
Just out of curiosity, do you know what because I'm somewhat aware of those people being prosecuted for giving people, thirsty people,
it's horrific.
Water.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The like most fucking Christian thing you could do. Like, not that I give a shit about any of that.
These people
but it was a
claim
good framing. It was like God would care about this.
Yeah.
But do you know what
what
exactly the legal precedent was for trying to prosecute those people?
Yeah, I mean,
assisting a crime.
Yeah, essentially, it's so illegal entry and illegal re-entry. Illegal entry is a misdemeanor. Illegal re-entry is a felony. So you are, it's essentially they could argue you're aiding or abetting a crime. You're obstructing justice, or what people are largely being charged under are harboring statutes, which are extremely broad. Did you want?
But I think there's also an aspect in that of it being like a national forest land. I think there was a charge in there that was
there was that one ended up getting.
See, that's what sucks about the fucking law is that it's. I mean, y'all know this so much better than I do, but just for the other listeners who are stupid and not lawyers, but like it's just so stupid because the idea, all those laws exist for very specific things, and then they're used, and that's why I hate the Constitution.
In all these,
it's just like obviously intuitively it has nothing to do with the fucking forest. Like it's just a man giving someone water, and I just wish that everyone would just feel the crux of the issue, but that's impossible. I understand.
I do think, and
I don't think it is impossible. I think like things are changing so rapidly and getting worse in such like accelerated ways that like there has to. I can't fucking help but say woo woo shit every goddamn episode of this podcast, but like if there's not some sort of like shift in consciousness around this stuff, like aside from just like on the ground practical organizing, then like what we're doing is hollow. And it doesn't have to be about ideology, but like at a certain point just understanding like this shit is absurd, these people need fucking water, that's what's important,
right?
And like throw everything away until you get to that.
And I think so I mean in some sense I don't want to be an accelerationist, but I think it's heightening, all of this is heightening what's going on, like,
whether or not individual people are accelerationist, like the earth is cooking,
right? And like making that clear, like that is the fight. But like, so for those cases, I do think one thing that people can do also that there's some sort of weird anarchist argument that I've never understood against doing jury duty, also because it seems to like engage with the state. Like the reason that that guy is currently not sitting in jail is because one person decided that they were going to not convict him. And I think leftists sort of should do jury duty and should, move for a hung jury, but it should do more than that. Should use the jury system as a site for organizing as well. Like listen to the arguments, make the arguments that the defense is going to make, befriend your co-jurors, organize them to your position. Don't just get a hung jury. Like, do not convict people. And I think that is for the smallest, marijuana misdemeanor up to federal crimes for giving people water in the desert and, anything else.
I was almost on.
I would go so far as to say like violent crimes too, just because.
Oh yeah.
I mean, literally anything else.
I was almost on a jury for. Okay, so I was almost sequestered, and I got to admit, I kind of intentionally fucked it up because I did not want to be sequestered because it sucks shit and they don't pay you. And I would have like lost my jobs because they're just like, your jobs can't fire you. And I'm like, yeah, they can. There's no workers' protection in Louisiana. If I didn't come to work because I was like, I'm on a jury, I had 3 bosses at the time, and they all would have been like, fuck you. Like, I worked retail at a barber shop. He wasn't going to be like, and he was for an Irish guy. Like, there was no way he gave a fuck. I mean,
fucking Irishman.
Yeah, who called me stupid all the time, and he liked me more than any of the other employees. And I also just like, you can't have the internet. You can only watch like VHSs of Seinfeld. Anyway, I was almost on the...
Sorry, that just sounds so
yeah,
bad.
they were like, I was like, what happens if I want to watch TV? They're like, you can request like a VHS of an old show that's not current and could influence you, like a Seinfeld. And I was like, no, I'm not doing it. I hate it. I'm just going to let this man go to jail. But they really wanted me. Have you seen this episode of Seinfeld? Wait, what? Oh, no, I don't understand
proof
humor.
That Mary Devon is an anti-Semite.
But wait, when there was another guy trying to get out of it, and it was a white man whose name was literally... I did not try to get out of it. I was like, I think I could be a good member of this jury. And I honestly was very honest, and I was like, I think I could be objective, because I knew that I had the moral responsibility to do it if I had to, but I also tweeted about it, but not this case I was on. They said that you can't tweet about any of the case, or you can't like post on social media. I just said I was on jury duty a lot, but it was a huge case and people were following it. So the judge called me into her chambers and was like, you were about to be on this jury. Why did you tweet about it so much? And I tweeted that they had brought in Popeyes. I had nothing to do with the case. It was a murder. It was the Saints player that was murdered. It was the Will Smith murder case.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, the defense really, really wanted me. The defense lawyer was also extremely attractive, and we were definitely flirting. Anyway,
I'm just surprised how much that happens. Like, in, like criminal trials.
Really? Yeah.
I worked for a guy, and he was like, "Yeah, I wear a new suit every day, and I like see that juror."
He's a billboard. He's a billboard attorney, and he looks way worse on the billboards.
It was Morris Bart.
But no, it was John Fuller. He's like 5'7", but he's a short king. Anyway, so. I was almost on this jury, and I was like freaking out, and because I was like, I'm gonna be sequestered, because I was so close to getting picked. I was there for 14 hours. They kept us until like 9 p.m. And so I was like, and I was texting my mom. I was like, I'm gonna get sequestered, and my dad was like, say racist stuff. He was like, just be super racist. And I was like, no, I can't do that. It's my job. It's my duty. And he's like, you're a much better American than I am. And then I was like, no.
And then he was like, wait, you're on jury duty? Yeah. What? This is just general advice.
But they were all like, just say crazy stuff. And so I didn't, but then I got in trouble for tweeting. But one guy got out of it very early, and his name was Mr. Butter. His last name was literally Butterball. And he was a white man who was like the most liberal white man. And he was just like, well, I just have a huge problem with the justice system because I think it's racist and blah blah blah. And I was like, okay. And I was like, that's why you should be on the fucking jury.
Yeah, right.
I really didn't mean to fuck it up. I'm glad I did, because I think I would have hated being sequestered. The trial ended up lasting a while, but I didn't intentionally tweet about it. But I also am like kind of happy I fucked it up. But anyway, I mean, the guy was convicted, and that sucks.
I don't think
I could have but you don't even have. It's impossible to have a hung jury in Louisiana because it's just a majority.
Oh, you don't have unanimous juries.
Yeah, we don't have unanimous
right.
jury.
Don't you have like a local thing?
Now.
Didn't that change?
Oh, it did?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, right. We voted on it.
We just did that.
But it didn't when I did this.
Yeah. Right.
Like, this was in 2016.
Yeah, this was months ago that had, like, a few months ago.
I voted on it. Yeah, it was 2. Vote on 2 or something.
Yes,
yeah.
on 2.
Yes, on 2. I did what they told me. But anyway, sorry. That was my jury duty story. You can edit it out. I just had to tell it.
No, that's great.
Well, I think part of it does seem like that is like a specific like battleground where like leftists could like affect change, and there should be organizing around.
What, just jury nullification every time, or what?
Basically, yeah. But
I mean,
also,
I think beyond nullification, just to be clear, like jury nullification is like, I disagree with this thing politically, and therefore like I just don't think that the state should be charging in this particular case. And I think that's great and that's fine. But I also think like we can do a much better job of just like using every single jury room as a site of organizing, like basically learn how to be a defense attorney, like learn what there's like 7 arguments that defense attorneys always make, like, and you know they're pretty easy to convince people of. And so like, yeah, you can frame it as a nullification argument, like I don't think people should be charged for weed possession. I like, obviously that's, and I think you might convince some people, but like on something like more serious, you might not convince people of that, but just like be the defense attorney in the room. But like also like befriend everyone, be nice.
It could radicalize people for sure.
Yeah, I think it does. I think it really can.
I think if that's going to happen, like, it would definitely make sense to couple with that fight that there's some sort of support network, almost like you do for like people on strike, for someone who did like take that sacrifice, because it's a fucking huge personal sacrifice to be on a jury. Like, people can't miss work when they're sick in this fucking country.
Yeah,
right?
and also if you do get on a jury, if you do get like sequestered, they pay you $10 a day, and you don't get, most people in Louisiana don't have salaried jobs.
Right.
And so it's just really shitty. I totally understand. Like, I think that it's really important, and I know that you're not being classist at all, but I do hate the people on Twitter who are just like, fuck you if you don't want to do your jury duty, because I'm just like, in your state, it's different. In our state, you don't get shit. Your employer's not required to give you shit, and you just don't get paid, and they can fire you. Like, it's totally different. I don't know.
And it's even that same culture around like, getting like vocally upset at like people scabbing for like the Uber strike or whatever.
Right.
And it's like, it is. I mean, like, I'm not going to defend scabs. That's fucked up. Like, you shouldn't do that. But like, we have to do a better job of like supporting
people and having some
people
sort of
on strike, because otherwise,
and
like,
thinking about it before it happens, to have some sort of like backup plan in place, like, or money in place to like be like, okay, what are you gonna lose? Like, we can, yeah.
Because I mean, any effort you spend just shitting on scabs like could have been spent trying to figure out how to support people
Also,
on
most
strike.
working people like that are, at least most people aren't on Twitter. Like, so that's another thing. It's like, you're just not doing anything, because these people that you're shitting on will never see this, and you kind of know that, which is why they're doing. I mean, as someone who has done this, like, being very online about something is just, and I do it. It's okay to vent and get it out there, but and I also think that the idea that it's like, that you can never criticize them in any capacity is stupid. But we all know the difference between getting online and being like, I'm right, and also being like, well, actually, not criticizing any individual specifically, but like, if we just came up with reasons that it's hard to do this, then no one would ever do it. Which is, I guess, what I'm doing with jury duty. But I don't know.
I mean, I think we can have a pretty easy balance between saying like, look, I think leftists should serve on juries, and I think they should use them as sites for organizing. If you don't, I don't think that's the worst thing. Yeah, like, that's not the end of the world. And so I think that like,
I think that they should. It's just that like,
yeah, but like, the moral culpability for is not that bad. Now, that said, like, I agree with the point of support. Like, if we see things in the world that we want people to be able to do to resist capital right now and resist the state right now, then part of the job of leftist organizing is creating the support structures to allow that to happen. So a jury fund, or like, especially for the Uber and Lyft strikes, like, unions have strike funds, Lyft drivers and Uber drivers don't. And I think, you get a lot of leftists if the DSA organizes a Uber strike fund, then like probably a bunch of Uber drivers are going to be DSA members eventually. So I think there's, material support is also a really good method for organizing. Like, I think you're right. Like, we shouldn't make excuses about things, but there are real material concerns, and like, excuses often have a core of real truth, that someone's not trying to avoid personal responsibility, but they're saying like, there are conditions that make this hard. The left should be helpful in creating, making,
and people should be honest with themselves about what they actually can do and can't. Because I could have honestly been on that jury.
Now, sometimes you have to sacrifice. Like, I do think sometimes like, we're all going to have to sacrifice, but there's a balance. I don't. Like, I want a left that's, nice and welcoming, and I think sometimes we have to take a hard line. But for the most part, like, meeting people where you're at is probably a better organizing strategy anyway.
Yeah, I mean, so like, there's many a bootlicker in the working class or whatever, but most scab because they can't afford to not get paid for a day, which is real. I've been there. And or it's out of fear. Like,
also, and a bootlicker is someone who fucks a Canadian.
That's true. I'm Canadian.
Thank you. I still want to hear what your utopias look like, mostly for a selfish reason, which is that one of our listeners is my sister, and she has a real skepticism about, like, she's left of liberal, but has a real skepticism about like centralized power and institutions in general, and she finds herself frequently in this position of like communitarianism, but like how do you avoid the problems of like states' rights, like that sort of thing, where on a community by community basis. In some of those communities, whack shit's going to go down, and like, should there be some mechanism for regulating that?
I actually think that is a hard question, right? It's sort of the struggle between like how do you deal with stuff when stuff goes bad, if there's no authority to appeal to, and I think like my utopia is a place where everyone can actualize their desires and they're not limited by sort of the dual coercive forces of either the state or capital. And I think, sort of libertarians make the mistake of avoiding the coercive forces of capital, and liberals, or tankies or whatever, like forget that the state is sort of a primary coercive force. I think that's sort of the project of, removal or destruction. The project of building is building a society that tries as much as we can to guard against the things that would make community living fall into the that's why I think like the organization against white supremacy, the organization against all these things is particularly important, because we want to lay the seeds for the community that we're trying to build.
Right.
I think there's also like the question is, what do you want when you're asking the federal government to step in and provide some sort of accountability, and is there no actual way that community members could provide that sort of same accountability? I think probably for most cases, that accountability can be provided for the community. I'm not going to say that we could go into the socialist utopia and there could be like a community that is like full of white supremacists, and there's like, a couple of people of color and they're just getting like, abused from jump. I think that's probably not going to happen if we do our job well, and we always incorporate anti-racism, anti-sexism into our organizing. That's possible. How do we deal with that? I don't think communities need to be atomized. I think the majority of the socialist future, the socialist utopia, is going to be able to provide that kind of accountability. And there's no problem with calling in people from the outside, or even people that have sort of like expertise, or that you can say like, look, these are the things that we all have agreed on. So I don't think communities need to say like, oh, we need to have a really, really small democratic system and only what the people want in that tiny closed universe is what we can do. I don't think that requires appealing to like, a federal government with armies and military and such.
I mean, I'm sympathetic to everything you're saying, but I do feel like one of the beautiful goals of communism is like a global society. And I think it's probably it's not realistic to say that like there isn't going to be some sort of like push towards like a global common source. I don't know if that would be like a government or what exactly that is, but I think if we get too bogged down in like what individual communities are going to be doing, we're like really missing the like obvious truth that like the world is at this point globalized and interconnected,
right,
in ways that interdependent that like in certain circumstances that should be undone, and like in some cases there's a benefit to it.
Yeah, I think I agree with that entirely, that the interconnectedness actually helps deal with this problem in a lot of ways, and that
it's not like unless shit gets really fucked up, like the internet isn't going to go away.
Right. So. And so we'll have that sort of like mechanism. I do think...
Knock on wood.
My God, we're only going to have fucking Seinfeld VHSs for the rest of time.
God, if that's the utopia, I really need to reconsider all my anarchism.
I don't know, man. It's a funny show.
Yeah.
But do you want to watch it for the rest of time?
I don't like it that much. I'm sorry. I never liked Seinfeld very much.
Man, have
I don't
you guys seen
understand comedy.
Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee? Because boy, is that dude actually a sociopath. Like, like the.
Well, dude, have you seen the fucking like him with his family like holding like M16s in like the occupied West Bank?
Yeah, they went to like an Israeli
little
army.
Like,
what the fuck?
It's like a little
there's a really
camp.
fucked video of
Dude.
like
What the fuck?
the Israeli army sometimes puts on like it's particularly for American Zionists where you like go and be a soldier for a day, and it's like very disturbing to watch like children hold assault rifles.
Well, if you think it's disturbing to watch children hold assault rifles, then don't go to Israel, because every fucking 18-year-old gets an assault rifle.
Yes, this is true.
Yeah. Sparky, let's hear about your utopian vision.
Utopia, yeah.
And wait, did we already talk about the law that what law you practice? We already did.
Oh yeah. Give us a little of your law.
Yeah, we did not. I don't think.
We went down to an English common law.
Unless you don't want to talk about it.
And smooth transition from the law you currently practice. To
I don't know if it's obvious, but we have never had two guests simultaneously before.
We've also never successfully interviewed
anyone.
Yeah.
This is going well. This is good.
You guys do great.
But yeah,
What do you want? Do you
Wait,
want
have you
utopia?
listened?
Do you want
Whatever you want to talk. Whatever you're more excited about talking about.
I also want to talk about the watch.
Your princess
this is
watch.
a beautiful watch.
It's not a princess watch. This is an octopus watch.
Oh,
Is it-
okay. It's a
is it
pink and
the one
purple
where-
octopus
Yeah, it's a slap watch.
Can I?
Yeah, it's slap yourself.
That's a
slap
slap watch as well, and
go
also
for it.
not at all princess-like.
I got it halfway.
So,
There we go.
what is Nick? Is Nick the newsletter editor?
Nick is the newsletter editor.
Yeah, so the current affairs newsletter editor, he and I have kind of like a common background in diving. He actually he got a lot farther. He worked on dive boats much more than I did. But we both kind of have like a cephalopod obsession. He has several octopus tattoos.
Oh, I thought you were
going
going to say your utopia was underwater. This is better. Go on.
I actually think Sparky's.
I mean, some of it is underwater. Yeah, we're going to be diving.
That's true. Just
yeah,
Do you
that's what I'm
dive?
saying.
Are you a diver?
I haven't in a while, but I used to.
Oh, cool.
I haven't heard that name in years.
But Nick got this octopus watch for me at Mardi Gras World today.
Oh, that's
nice.
Yeah, so I've just been.
Can I play with it?
Of course.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, my utopia is
at
full of octopus slap watches. Yeah, I don't know. No,
You're right. It's not a princess watch.
It's not a princess watch.
Yeah.
This is a very serious. It's a very serious.
If it
thing.
were, it would be fine. We don't subscribe
Yeah,
to
no,
gender
we don't.
binaries
I
here,
have a
but-
princess watch. Don't get me wrong. It's not the watch that I'm wearing right now.
But fuck the monarchy, dude.
Well, fair.
But look, you don't wear a princess watch every day. An octopus watch is for everyday use. A
Yeah,
princess
exactly.
watch is for a special occasion.
That's true.
No, I don't know. Day job is fairly similar to Oren's, but I do fewer cool things.
That's not true. He does consumer finance, which is deep and cool.
Well, so right now I'm an economic justice fellow at a racial justice, civil rights organization.
Would you say that you're an economic justice fellow?
Fellow? Yeah, my better moments.
Hard hitting questions here.
So is I do stuff around housing, employment. We have a lawsuit against Macy's that we filed recently about.
Oh no, what they
Fuck
do?
Macy's.
They appear to have a pretty messed up criminal background check system for their employees,
Oh,
where
no.
people get fired basically for extremely minor, very very old.
Oh shit! I accidentally
yeah.
opened a credit card because I bought Spanx on edibles. And she was like, "Do you want 20%?" She was this lady named Donna. She was a huge yat. She was like, "You want 20% off, sweetheart?" And I was like, "Absolutely."
Hell yes, I do.
And then she's like, "Give me your social security number." And I was like, "Sounds good." And then 30 minutes later, I had a credit card, and my credit's getting worse because I have not paid it off yet because of the Spanx. Anyway, sorry.
No ethical consumption.
No part of that is ethical consumption, except for eating the edibles. That's the only.
Yeah.
Well, but maybe I don't know.
You can only buy Spanx on edibles. It's too. I mean, none of y'all understand this. Unless you do, good for you. Anyway, but Macy's criminal.
So-
that's fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, it's I feel like Oren and I basically approach this stuff in essentially the same way. It's funny when you guys were talking about the law kind of being twisted to be applied, with the whatever it is, vandalizing a national forest or whatever
Right.
for people leaving water out for people to drink. I mean, this is just the way that law has always worked, right? Where you have the first application of antitrust law is union busting, or the first application of anti-lynching law is against a Black Lives Matter protester.
Right.
So, I mean, that's just how it goes. You use it as a tool where you can, and the other side uses it as a tool where they can, and
Right.
nobody really cares what it actually is for. Yeah, so, I mean, housing, employment, I've been trying to sort of orient toward, it's hard within big legacy organizations, but orient toward less kind of traditional civil rights areas and more kind of consumer financy also, because that's my background, because I think that the folks who do civil rights don't really think a lot about things like debt collection,
Right.
or things like student loans, things like credit reports, there are two kind of like separate communities of people who think about discrimination and people who think about finance, and actually it's all completely interwoven.
Yeah.
Do you think there's an ideological block against like the integration of those two concerns?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of opinions on that, some of which would probably get me fired. I mean, I think that, anytime you're dealing with a bunch of lawyers, like this is true for consumer lawyers too. Like lawyers if you go to like law schools, especially fancy law schools, lawyers tend to come from wealthy families.
Right.
So like I went to Yale Law School. They did a survey while I was there, and I think it was like more than 75% of people had at least one parent with an advanced degree.
Right.
And of course, they don't conceive of themselves this way, right? If you survey, everybody says they're middle class and like,
Right.
That's,
or upper middle class.
or upper middle class, and actually they're all extremely wealthy. But I think that, that the way that you interact with the world is based on your experience. And I think that like a lot of people, if they've never had an account in collections and never had to deal with a debt collector, or if they've never like been turned down for an apartment because they had some shit on their credit report, like you just don't really think about it.
Right. I've had both those things happen to me, and I have rich parents. I'm just horrible with money. But yeah,
a lot of those
I
people
have
too
terrible
probably
credit.
haven't even lived in a building where they knew someone who was going through that,
Right.
or worked alongside someone,
Right.
where they're getting calls at their job asking for that person.
Right. And I mean, look, like this is part of the conversation about race and class, right? Is like people whose parents have advanced degrees and have a fair amount of money, if they're not white, still get discriminated against constantly in like a million different ways.
Of course.
A lot of times when it comes to employment, when it comes to housing, when it comes to voting, like all of those things, when it comes to criminal justice,
Right.
like, so I'm gonna
Just
interrupt
being a
with cops.
visible person.
Yes. So I think that in a lot of ways, that's just stuff that might connect to people's direct experiences who have gone to law school in a little bit more of an immediate way. And then like the consumer bar is weird because it's a lot of it is just people who are trying to make money, because like the statutes that you use to sue debt collectors give you attorney's fees. You can make a ton of money suing debt collectors without charging your clients anything.
Right.
Which is great, but it's also like, it's just a completely different headspace.
Yeah. Damn.
Yeah.
It is weird that you can accidentally make money doing something good in this world.
Well, it's intentional, right? Like that's
Right.
the whole point of the thing. Like you say, okay, well, this is at some point somebody actually did something good and said, okay, we're going to try to address a problem that affects poor people, and the way that we're going to do that is we're going to let them get attorneys.
It.
Yeah, we're
Right.
going to let the attorneys get paid from the other side.
Right.
And so and this is part of what I really love about doing consumer laws. It's basically it's just wealth redistribution. I mean, it's like it would be good if it went beyond what was stolen from people, but at least you get to like give people back what was stolen from them,
yeah.
and then also get paid for your time doing it.
How long have you been doing it?
Like 5 years now.
Oh, wow.
So I was at Legal Aid for
How
a
old
couple
are you?
years.
You're young.
I'm 31.
I think
Jesus
you
Christ.
both graduated in 2011, undergrad. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, I looked at your LinkedIn profile, so that makes you the exact same age as us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
which is, I
God.
know, it's so
So
depressing.
sad.
Yeah, both been lawyers for 5 years.
Yeah.
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 We kind of mirrored each other going through. Although you lied to me
a
about whether you were in law
babysitter.
school for a while.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to admit it.
Yeah. That's respectable.
I was very ashamed. I also didn't want to stay in law school.
Yeah.
My first year, also your first year, Troy Davis.
What, the anarchist didn't want to stay in law school? Crazy.
More people should be ashamed about being in law
Well, I was very ashamed about saying
yeah,
it, and I was still
definitely,
Y'all are doing good things.
still the first year I was trying to suss out whether I even liked it and didn't want to commit like my soul to it.
Right.
But also then the first year, Troy Davis was murdered by the state, and I like. I don't know why, of all things. I knew everything was sort of fucked when I went in, and that's why I was sort of like, I don't even know that I am actually doing this with my full self. But when Troy Davis was murdered, I just like was like, oh, what the fuck is going on? Because there's a bunch of evidence showing that he
Right.
shouldn't have been. Like all the powerful people, like the Pope wrote a letter.
Yep.
When the Pope writes a letter, you're supposed to listen. But they still killed him, and it really fucked with me. And then I was very much considered not being in law school. But then inertia just takes you forward. And here I
Right.
am.
Yeah.
I think it's good.
Yeah,
I
it's-
think that you've helped people, and it's good.
It's interesting, like, becoming a lawyer does empower you to do a lot of good, but it's also like, if you're an activist in any respect, you're like engaging in this game with a very competitive entity that also sets the terms of the game. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, I get the sense listening to your podcast, the Current Affairs podcast, that like a lot of you had like a dog shit time in law school and are in like a ton of debt, and it fucking sucks. But like, do you feel like you were empowered to such an extent that like it was worth it?
You want to take this?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think that's a hard question. So I teach at a law school in Boston now, adjunct, and
I love any question that before the guest answers has to go.
But so my students ask me this sort of thing all the time, and I have a hard time trying to figure out whether like I should encourage people to do law, because on one hand you get this magic orb of power in some sense that you can if you do it well, you can actually share some of that with people and democratize some of the legal profession, legal work, legal outcomes, redistribute wealth, all these sorts of things, and it does give you access to all those systems. Mm-hmm. At the same time, if you're doing it well, you're not going to have that many. If you're doing it good, if you're doing it in a good way, you're not going to have very many victories. Right. The state and corporations are much more powerful in the law, and they are always going to be. And law school is a very risky proposition. Mm-hmm. A lot of people become much more conservative in law school. A lot of people make excuses. They go and work for a corporate firm, and they're like, "Oh, I'm just going to do it until I pay off my loans." But then they get adjusted to the standard of living. Mm-hmm. Or you say, like, actually, I can do more good if I work for a corporate law firm because I make more money. I can. It's a utilitarian argument. I can like donate more of that money, and like you make like $40,000 a year at a legal aid organization, and you're just sort of like saving people from jail that might go to jail the next week.
Also, let's be clear, their principles change too.
Yes,
they fucking change as people.
But like law school is very good at telling you how to justify when you're
right. Yeah, there's the material consideration. I'm sure often comes first, where it's just like I am in a fuck ton of debt and I need to rationalize.
And it's hard to blame people.
Yeah, it's very hard to blame people, and like I do think that there's an like.
You see, here's the thing. I don't think anyone can do anything wrong because I'm such a spy. I'm a fucking octopus. Your favorite. I have no spine.
You're very smart and good at camouflage.
Yeah, I have 8 limbs.
And you decorate your lair. You do decorate your lair. You are an octopus. Okay, go on.
No. It's just like we have to recognize that that's a real material consideration. At the same time, like I don't know, like. Neither Sparky or I really had that much money. We have a bunch of debt, and like we're choosing to do the other thing. And I don't think that's like, wow, look at us, we're so great. It's just that like, if you're going into law school, you kind of know, you should know a little bit about what you're getting into, or you should at least be able to discover it within the first couple of years. Mm-hmm. And if you have those principles, you might have to make that sacrifice. You're getting we're getting a lot of benefits. Like we get a lot of prestige. Mm-hmm. We get to like access power in a way that like neither of us should really be able to. Like we're crazy. Like no one should let us into any of those rooms. But the trade-off is you should do something good with it because there's only a limited amount of good you can do. So you have to be doing something good at every fucking second to make it worthwhile. Mm.
I mean, I think it was worth it for me. Mm-hmm. I think if you had asked me this,
if I answered the question,
if you had asked me this 2 weeks ago, I might have had a different answer. But I just don't think that I would have. I don't think I would have understood how power works in this country in anywhere close to the same way if I hadn't gone to like specifically an extremely prestigious law school.
Right. Yeah, you got to see both the legal system and also the prestige industrial complex.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you get to see that I mean, I said this in one of our recent podcasts, I feel like if I hadn't done that, I would have always just had this nagging sense that like, oh, people who did that must be better than me somehow. And they're not. Yeah. And I think that's an extremely hard realization to have in your soul without actually just going and seeing it yourself. Right.
I've just always assumed they were worse than me.
Well, they are worse than you. That's true.
The only difference.
They're not just worse. They're also. I don't. Michelle. But Obama I don't believe that. Michelle Obama is whatever. But she did have a great quote where she was like, "I've been in all the rooms with the important people, and they're idiots."
Yeah. Right.
And it's like,
Michelle Obama's fucking great. I don't care. I don't care that it's the most neoliberal thing to masturbate to her arm muscles. But like, I still, they're all so weirdly obsessed with her arms. But I do think that she's great. Like, if we're gonna forgive a wife for her husband's crimes, I think it should be Michelle. Anyway, sorry, keep on going. Mm-hmm.
No, but just Brianna Renix was talking about this, I think, on that same podcast where she I think people that are trying to do something good always have a chip on their shoulders and wonder if like they're doing it wrong, or if like the people that are doing the terrible thing actually know something that they don't.
Right.
And I mean, I didn't go to an elite law school, although there were enough people there that were wealthy for me to understand.
It's Northeastern, right?
Northeastern. It's like geared.
Sounds good to me.
It does sound good. It's I liked it. And
Those are very good directions.
Yeah.
North.
Oh, see, I completely disagree.
Well, he's a Western.
I like South and West.
But it's geared towards public
like
interest
Right.
students, and initially was a working class law school that was
Right.
supposed to be, it was a hub of critical legal theory.
Right.
So I mean, I went there for that particular reason, but like law school still just attracts a bunch of people that want to make money, and even that particular law school. But
Right.
it is a little bit empowering to say, like, to be able to confidently say, like, no, when I'm telling you that socialism is the way forward, it's not because I didn't do I did all the things that you said I needed to
Right.
do.
I've been exposed to every dog shit idea that
Yeah.
I'm supposed to that is supposed to be the answer to my naivete, and I still
think this thing, and you still haven't had a good argument. I mean, Marshall Steinbaum, I think,
Yeah.
is a really good at arguing for this reason, who does like radical economics, but went to the University of Chicago, which is like the hub of all terrible.
the worst.
And I think, you don't need to do that. Like, I wish we didn't buy into that,
Yeah.
but I understand that people have these insecurities. I have these insecurities about being good enough all of the time. And I think it gives you a little bit of an extra thing when you're like, okay, I did the thing that said it makes me smart. I'm still telling you the other thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think and there's a difference between saying like, okay, I'm glad I did this, and saying like other people should do it. I don't think I would ever say other people should do it, because I know how likely it is, no matter how you go in, that you're going to come out bad.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's basically luck that I didn't come out bad.
Or the
I think
people-
you'll
or the
both
people
seem
that
to
you
come
know.
out very good.
that?
Or the people that you know.
Or the people, yeah, exactly. And like, I don't think that you can, you are a different person. I mean, you're a different person 3 years from a period, no matter what you're doing. But like, you go through that process. You are a different person on the other side. There's no guarantee that you are going to be the person who you want to be at the end of the 3 years.
Right.
What did y'all think
that's
y'all were going to
fucking
do when
terrifying.
you were in high school? What did you want to do?
Actually, it's funny. We actually just had this sort of discussion at the
Yeah,
Kerner
but
First
I
Retreat.
escaped it.
You did escape it. I don't know if you. I didn't have a real plan. Elementary school was like middle school was kind of shitty for me. I didn't really know what I was going to do.
You seem like maybe a drummer.
I wasn't but the thing is, like, I felt bad that I wasn't very good at things.
Yeah.
I was like, I think I tried to play some instrument. I was stuck in playing the viola. I was very, very bad at it. But I was the only one, because I was like, no one will know what I'm doing if I'm the only one. So they stuck me in like the quartet, and I was like, fuck, don't you know that I don't know how to do this?
Yeah.
Mary Devin is laughing at you for being a nerd so hard she just snorted.
But so I don't my first year of like college or end of high school, I did not have a vision of what I was going to do. I thought I was going to live in Seattle, get a job, and sort of make it up as I go along. I didn't think about going to law school very much, and even when I was taking the LSATs, the entrance exams for law school, I wasn't sure that I wanted to go. I mean, as Sparky was saying, I wasn't even sure that I wanted to go when I was already there.
Right.
So this being a sort of quote unquote impact immigration lawyer was not a thing that I was like, oh, yep, that's my path.
All right, I'm gonna guess for you too.
Yeah.
Drummer.
Some kind of like very adventurous scientist, like a guy who has to climb a mountain to get a little sample.
Oh yeah,
That's what I think
pretty
sounds-
close.
That would be killer. I mean, like, so I didn't think that was realistic for me. So when I was in high school, I thought there was just no way I was going to be able to go to college.
Yeah.
And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to just be like a small business manager, basically, just like
Were
have a
you-
store.
Were you like a fuck up in
Yeah.
high school?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Did your parents go to college?
No.
Okay.
My dad like went to community college for a little bit, and then he was a stained glass window maker for
Gotcha.
a long time. And that's basically what I did.
For
Like,
churches? Or?
yeah, he did churches. He did like people's houses. He did all kinds of stuff.
That's a cool ass job.
Yeah, it was really great.
Yeah.
He makes some really nice windows. I kind of wish I knew how to do that now.
Yeah.
But like, that's basically what I did. Like, I went and got a job like when I was 16, and I like worked full time and didn't worry about high school. And like, I didn't go to college immediately. I was like a co-manager of a small business when I
Right.
was 18. And it just ended up like it sucked and it was boring. And
Yeah.
and then like I enrolled in community college and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like it turns out maybe I don't hate school. Maybe I just hated high school.
What did you want? What did you think you were a writer? You knew you were going to be a writer.
No, actually, I wanted to be on the cutting edge of like some sort of science. Like I wanted to be on the cutting edge of human knowledge, bro. I wanted to do like.
What does that even mean?
I want to do like such good physics that like I wanted to open the portal onto the video game Half-Life. I don't know.
I literally wanted to be a suicide girl.
I was about to say you all are very ambitious, and I was like, well, no, that's actually very ambitious too.
Yeah,
There's a lot of ambition in this group.
Yeah.
What about you, brother?
I mean, essentially
an
terrorist.
ayahuasca shot. Oh yeah.
Yeah, you wanted to be a political.
Yeah, you said that like if
I mean,
like, would you be effective or would you?
you said it
probably not. I kind of was like, well, I guess fuck everything. I'll just sort of like live like a Bill Ayers life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like I'm just gonna like bomb property. That's what like that is actually what I thought.
on a recent episode.
Also very ambitious.
On a recent episode, Benjamin was like, if I had never done psychedelics, I would currently be on death row for like some poorly thought out political bombing. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, either that or I would have just fucking blown myself
You've
up.
also
like
said that
the
about your
Weather
alternative
Underground.
school that you went to. That helped a lot too, right?
I mean,
Benjamin went to a high school with 6 people who were in juvie, and they
Yeah.
taught them how to make pottery.
yes, that's like so accurate.
That sounds like an ideal. I like.
I actually really like.
I kind of think that's what.
Well,
most high
I
school
went
should
to
be.
like I went to a real like public high school first and hated it, and it basically got kicked out. And then like there was like a very cool, one of the few like good examples of what a charter school could be.
Right. I went to
Because it wasn't the only option. It was like a charter, like
Yeah, and it wasn't like a. I mean, it was like it was a fucking like teacher co-op.
Right.
Like it was a very like good place. I mean, I was still.
Yeah, you still gave him two
I was
middle
still an
fingers the whole
idiot.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
But in retrospect.
No, I mean, like, and like, I appreciate the teachers I had and blah 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 blah. But anyway, like,
They're all great people. Fine.
I probably would have like blown myself up,
Yeah.
like the Weather Underground actually did, and yeah, that's what I thought I was gonna be.
That definitely defined your aesthetic for the
Yeah.
rest of your
But
life.
then you just decided to blow yourself.
I just decided to bomb on
He's almost
stage.
there.
Hey.
Well, we've been at it for a minute. Should we wrap up?
Yeah, we said 7 and 9. It's
Do you guys
8:51.
have anything you want to plug? Anything coming out soon, writerly wise, or people we should read or donate to?
Podcast, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, subscribe to the magazine, www.currentaffairs.org, and listen to our podcast.
That's
Support us
really
on
good.
Patreon. We have no ads. We're listener supported. It's very, very good, I think, And then, we were talking about it before, but Brianna Renix works at an immigration detention center in Dilley, Texas. There's a bunch of different organizations on the border that are doing, work for people that are trying to immigrate into this country.
She works at the detention center.
She
She
works
doesn't work for.
She
the
does not work for it. She works at the detention center,
Yeah.
and so folks should donate to those organizations because it's really hard, grueling work, and obviously very underfunded.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Sparky.
yeah. Don't. I'm not to take away. Definitely donate to Renix's organization.
Just
but also,
don't donate to the detention center.
So I feel like people like don't quite appreciate just how cool the print edition of Current Affairs is, and how much
work and
how much work and time and like how many illustrators contributed to it, and
The
like
art is actually good.
It's
as
very
fuck.
good.
yeah, it's like I mean it's I think people think like print magazine it's gonna be whatever, it's like cheap paper or something. No, like we put a lot of like time and energy and money. None of us, very few of us get paid. Oren and I don't get paid to do anything with the magazine. Like all the money from subscribers basically goes to writers and artists. So go subscribe, you'll like it.
Cool. All right. Thanks for coming on the show.
yeah, thanks for having
Thank
us.
you. We love you.
I love you. Bye.
We love you all
Peace.
too.